we're depressurising in the style of Fighter Command, 92 Squadron. We are the boys of 92 Fighter Squadron, and we've got our pints on. It's not a modern mental health approach.
No.
It's the 1940s.
Seemed to work for some, though.
Seemed to work for some. Really, you should call me sir if I'm sitting at this desk.
Yeah. Well, sir.
The thing that's really grinding the Luftwaffe pilots down is the campaign's failing.
They would be interrogated individually, quite aggressively. No one knows whether this system is going to stand up to the strain.
I just need to pick that scab one last time. Welcome to Walking the Ground with me, Al Murray, and James Holland. Our Battle of Britain series is, well, we're nearing the end, aren't we? The end of the Battle of Britain. And I think that's why, really, we're stood by this not altogether unsymbolic
tailplane of a Heinkel 111.
Yeah, exactly.
Here at Duxford.
Yeah.
Bullet holes. I mean, this was shot down on the 30th of August.
Yeah, yeah.
And the thing is, you know, as the battle progressed, the British were starting to get a much better feel for what was going on with the Luftwaffe, what they were trying to do, but also the morale and mood of the crews. Because the officers, pilot of this, for example, had he survived, would be taken to Trent Park.
Yeah.
Trent Park is a big sort of country house, northeast of London, owned by Sir Philip Sassoon. And there they would be interrogated individually and quite aggressively. You know, the spotlight treatment and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But after that, they'd then be taken to kind of another room with fellow officers, soft furnishings, biscuit and cocoa, cups of tea, that kind of stuff, made to relax.
Yeah.
What they didn't realise is they were being bugged.
Yeah.
And the transcripts of those buggings make for really, really interesting reading.
Well, because essentially what you have is you have people listening, recording the conversations, and interpreters then interpreting the stuff verbatim.
Yeah.
So then, and it will be, you know, how did you get on, Hans? Well, don't worry. I mean, you know, they really put the pressure on me, but I didn't tell them anything about the, you know, the way the squadron works.
Yeah. But it's not going well, is it?
Yeah.
Well, I know, personally, I think you know, the Priory can't let us down now. Well, I'm not so sure. All that kind of stuff. So there's lots of that going on. You can see this dip. But in this episode, we're going to be looking at how they did finally smash the Luftwaffe.
Well, and what's happening is that and we've talked about this across the films, is as the battle progresses, RAF, Fighter Command, the Observer Corps, they're refining what they're doing, they're perfecting it.
They're getting better.
They're getting better at it because of the practice of of being in the clinch.
Exactly.
They discover what's working, what doesn't work. Whereas what the Luftwaffe are doing are groping around looking for options because nothing's worked so far.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah.
With increasingly depleted services.
Yeah. But the crucial thing with this battle is the Germans absolutely have to win it. They can't nearly win it.
No.
They can't three-quarters win it.
No, they can't give the RAF a bloody nose and say that they've got a moral victory.
No, they can't do any of those things. Whereas actually what the RAF has to do is hang on and not be crushed. And as the battle progresses, as one side perfects its techniques and the other is blundering around looking for options, thus the Luftwaffe finds itself drawn inexorably into Germany's first major defeat of the Second World War. And certainly its most decisive defeat. Right, well, let's look at how that happens. So here we are in the White Hart again, Jim.
Yep.
We're depressurising in the style of Fighter Command, 92 Squadron. We are the boys of 92 Fighter Squadron, and we've got our pints on. It's not a modern mental health approach.
No.
It's the 1940s.
Seemed to work for some, though.
Seemed to work for some, different times. But the British are able actually to monitor the state of the Luftwaffe's morale and see that the effect of the relentless pressure of the battle, see what that's doing to German pilots.
Yeah, absolutely. And just while we're here in the pub, I mean, just compare that to the German experience. Over here, you know, Tony Bartley and co can come down to the White Hart in Brasted. They get patted on the back, told what splendid fellows they are, and makes them feel a little bit better about themselves. You know, imagine that in France. You know, you're in the Pas de Calais, you know, with, I don't know, JG52 or whatever it is, and you go into a local bar, and there you've got a sort of suspicious Frenchman kind of polishing a glass, kind of resentfully. You know, it's a very different experience.
Well, and you're living in in encampments and tents and stuff too. So it's not like you're living in permanent billets like the guys are here too.
No, exactly that. But you're the occupiers of a nation that doesn't want to be occupied. So that just changes everything. So you haven't got that kind of relaxation in the evening. And you've got this sort of endless reports you've got to do, this constant obsession with kind of constantly talking about it. But you're right. What's really interesting is the transcripts that they picked up while these officers, downed officers, were in Trent Park, are really revealing, and they're all transcribed, and one can read them from every single day. There they are. This is what was recorded in all these different conversations, and what you get is a growing picture. To start off with, there's lots of people sort of go, well, it won't be long until, our boys come across the channel and then we'll stuff these people and we'll be back flying again any minute. Yeah. That very quickly starts to peter off by the beginning of September. By the middle of September, you really notice it. That a lot of it is, we're doomed, we're never going to win here.
Yeah,
did you notice, I saw it, I was told that there weren't any Spitfires left and, a whole load of them still attacked me out of the sun. Yeah. Supposedly they're on their knees, but I don't see any evidence of it. And you still get some outliers, some people go, no, we've got them on the run, they're about to be done. Yeah. But it comes increasingly rare. Yeah, and that I think is what's so interesting. And the other things that really stand out is how frustrating they find it that they're being attacked every single night by Bomber Command.
Well, because this is what's really, really interesting, isn't it? People, I think, tend to think of Bomber Command, it's later in the war with heavy bombers, and that's where they start to have a real effect. But actually, the general nuisance of Bomber Command sorties that's running at the same time as the rest of the Battle of Britain. And of course, the Germans have failed to they don't know what airfield is what. No. So when they think they're trying to suppress fighter command, there's also a bomber command in the mix who they're also failing to suppress. So I mean, it is interesting. It's the sort of drip, drip, drip of pressure, not only of the sorties they're flying, but of the sorties that are being flown against them.
Yeah, well, very typically, you might get two Blenheims, Bristol Blenheims, flying over in the middle of the day, and one would get shot down, the other one would somehow make it back. They very quickly realised that this wasn't a good way to do things. This is RAF Bomber Command, so they would then send them over by night.
Yeah.
So what that meant was, first of all, every time a German fighter staffel, which is equivalent of a squadron, although it was kind of half the size, because you would have 12. Yeah. And you very often only have 9 or 10 or 11 or whatever. You would then have to keep 2 behind to protect the airfield. Yeah. So if you've only got 10, that actually means you've only got 8 that you can send to over to England, because 2 are staying behind, strapped in, ready to go the moment the alarm comes off. And the alarm is not by radar, it's by observers, and those are usually flak gunners, anti-aircraft gunners on the coast.
So they're not getting anything like the warning.
Then at night, if they come over at night, then they're being kept awake by bombs going off and everything. There's lots of complaints about I couldn't get a wink of sleep last night because the bombers were over.
And they're practicing very bad light security on their airfields as well. So they're all lit up, and Bomber Command can come and find them, which is one of the weird mistakes the Germans are making.
The other thing about the Pas-de-Calais is they've had to get all their single-engine fighter squadrons and groups as close as they possibly can to the coast because of this shortage of fuel. Yeah. Because the tanks aren't very big and only having 10 minutes over the combat zone and all the rest of it. So you get them as close as you can, so you haven't got to travel 20 miles from inland. Yeah. And what that means is the Pas-de-Calais is just stuffed full of new grass strips. It is a target-rich environment if you happen to be from Bomber Command. And while they can't hit a barn door at 30 yards, it doesn't really matter. The point is, as long as they're keeping them awake, being nuisance, keeping vital measures from its back at base.
But also, the thing that's really grinding the Luftwaffe pilots down, more than anything else, is the campaign's failing. You're putting all this effort in, you're under relentless attack, and it's not working, it's failing. Yes. And that must just be corroding their morale, which is why, after all, the way they see it's the Angriff on England, but the attack on England, but there is no Battle of Britain in the German imagination because they lose it. Yes. So it's a thing that as the battle gets worse, morale goes off, and basically, because after all, German strategy is permanently shifting, it shifts on, it turns into something else, and the idea they ever fought the thing is kind of laid to rest, isn't it? Yeah. As the battle runs, which is really, really interesting.
It is, and I think it's the fighter pilots who get the toughest deal, really. Yeah. But one of the problems is, because their aircraft production is not keeping pace with the losses by this stage, What's happening is, they start off with, about 700 and something single-engine fighters at the beginning of July. By September, it's down to about 200, maybe less. And the problem you have then is suddenly your staffel, instead of having 12 or 10 or 9, they've actually got 3, 4, 5 planes, 1 plane. What that means is the pilots that are experienced are not going to hand over their precious kite to some sprog that's just arrived who's a bit wet behind the ears and doesn't know what he's doing. So that means the experienced guys fly more and more and more. And there was one guy, Ulrich Steinhilper, who writes about flying 7 times in one day. I mean, that would never happen in fighter command. The most anyone would ever be expected to fly in fighter command is 4 times a day. At least 2 of those would be X-rays, i.e. taken off and it doesn't... They don't actually see any combat, nothing happens.
They're in the pub.
And usually it would only be 1, max 2 sorties a day. But 7 flying over the channel is just ridiculous. And of course that is having a mental and physical wear, as well as a lowering of morale, as well as compounded by the fact that they're not winning. All of that is a kind of perfect storm, which means that the morale within the Luftwaffe just plummets.
Well, that's what losing will do. And the reason they're losing is because the system they're up against is completely pegged against them, right?
Well, it is. I mean, their intelligence is poor, their tactics are poor, operationally they're not up to it because they're not producing enough planes, new planes and repaired planes. They haven't prepared for this properly, and they're up against an enemy who knows exactly what it's doing and who's prepared for this, and is rather surprised to discover that actually the system they prepared is working brilliantly. And actually it's the genius of the Dowding system that we should have a look at next.
Okay, great. But we finished these pints first.
Oh yeah, maybe another one.
Yeah, all right, okay.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.
All the ascendancy of the Hurricanes and Spitfires would have been fruitless but for this system which had been devised and built before the war. It had been shaped and refined in constant action, and all was now fused together in the most elaborate instrument of war.
And that was Winston Churchill.
Well, of course it was.
And I'm sure all of you got every word of that. But basically, the Dowding system is the difference.
It really, really is. I can't stress it enough. It's the genius of this system. It's what wins the Battle of Britain. It's because the Germans have just never come up against anything like this, because there hasn't been anything like this before.
Because no one ever has.
Because no one ever has. It's the world's first fully coordinated air defence system, and it is a game changer. It means that the Luftwaffe can't just come over and just suddenly surprise a whole load of Spitfires on the ground at Hawkinge or Tangmere or Biggin Hill.
And it means they can't make it up as they go along, which is
They can't make it up as they go along.
Which is what their campaign is. I think what's really interesting, though, is that this system has been devised and it's trainable. You know, the WAFs working here are on a fortnight's training. It's trainable. It's sustainable.
Because it's simple.
Well, but it's also then adapted and adapting, and they're getting better at it. They're learning on the job as they develop it. And that is the sort of the fact that the system is also adaptable, open-ended, is why it's so successful. You know, they're not stuck on the first attempt and thinking, well, why doesn't it work? They're changing, they're tweaking, and all, as it goes, in a way that the Luftwaffe does change and does tweak, but it still doesn't work because they're still having to face this.
Well, there's 2 points here. The first one is that it's standardised as well, which I think is really, really sensible. So you can be a pilot, and you can be operating at Drem outside Edinburgh, and then you can be posted down to Biggin Hill, and everything's set up in exactly the same way. It's all the same. And ditto goes to being, you can be a plotter in an operations room up in Northumberland, and you can then be posted down to Duxford or to Hawkinge or whatever, North Weald or something. And again, everything is the same. You know, so you can be working in Scotland at 9 a.m. and 4 o'clock you can be in the afternoon, you can be down south. And everything will be familiar. And that's really, really clever. But I think the other thing that's really, really clever about it is it still requires quite a lot of human input. And no one knows whether this system is going to stand up to the strain. And yet it does. And not only does it do that, all the people involved, all those people in their RDF chains on the coast, and all the people here, they're getting better and better and better and slicker, and they're working out what works and what doesn't, and adjusting and honing their skills and their skills of interpretation.
This is really brilliant that this is recreated as it was. The scaffolding sort of speaks to there's an element still of improvisation, but that leaves it open enough to change. So as they progress, but you think of the stress in here. You think of having to keep calm. You've got to keep the information,
cigarette smoke,
clear. Well, obviously the clouds of fag smoke, but you've got to keep all the information clear and precise and all that. The people keeping their lids on in here, emotionally, is quite something, isn't it?
Well, you and I have sort of made fun of the fact that RAF Bomber Command crews are always incredibly calm.
They all talk like this.
Yes, over the coast now, Skipper.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. But that calmness, that not raising your voice, of not showing anxiety, of not getting hysterical, all that is absolutely part of the RAF's culture. Whether you are here in the filter room, whether you're in an operations room, whether you are at Angels 22 in a Spitfire. The point is to keep calm and clear. And of course that's kind of diffuses a sense of calm over everyone involved as well. You might not be feeling it inside, but it exudes confidence and self-assurance, which actually is really important, and that means your morale stays high as well.
Well, panic is contagious. Everyone knows that.
Yeah.
It's the Dowding system that is
the difference.
Is the difference, because otherwise it would be combat air patrols, and there would be the thing that
they would have been defeated.
Well, the Spitfires and Hurricanes might miss.
Well, the fate of the Army of the Air would have been the fate of. That's what would have happened to Fighter Command and the rest of the RAF. I mean, it is inconceivable that they could have held out against the Luftwaffe had they not had this air defence system, the world's first fully coordinated air defence system anywhere.
Yeah. Well, thank God for that, and the English Channel.
Yeah, that helps as well. Well, Al, I think it's only appropriate that we end this series here in Dowding's office.
Really, you should call me sir if I'm sitting at this desk.
Yeah. Well, sir, what I was thinking is...
Yes.
I mean, the Dowding system is at the heart of it, isn't it? It's the heart of the British victory.
Yeah, well, and we do talk about the few is how people come at the Battle of Britain, but actually, the RAF is this great big organisation with men and women all absolutely critical to how Britain defends itself.
Yeah.
And it really is that the guys in the planes are the point of the spear, but there's no spear without the whole of the rest of the RAF, the officers making these decisions, innovating, training, the layer upon layer of the Dowding system, the Royal Observer Corps, which isn't part of the RAF after all,
No.
all of
civilian
those
organisation
working in combination. And actually, this is not just the fighter pilots, it's not just the few, it's many people.
Yes, but it is also the individuals as well. The individual of Dowding and the individual of Park in particular. Those are the two men that are the architects of this. Everyone else is doing their bidding, whether you be up in a Spitfire or whether you be in the Observer Corps or whatever, or in the filter room or in the factories. Yeah. They are rightly fated as the architects of this incredible victory. And I think the interesting thing about the Battle of Britain is it is a really, really significant battle, because Churchill said in one of his speeches, he said, Hitler knows he must defeat Britain or else lose the war. And you know what? He's absolutely spot on. He really is, because in 1940, Germany knows that if it doesn't win quickly, it's got a problem. The German way of war is all about quick, short, sharp victories, because it doesn't have access to the world's oceans. Well, it doesn't have merchant fleets. It's a continental power.
And it's had those victories up until now, because make no mistake, the fall of France is absolutely spectacular.
Yes, it is a strategic earthquake.
It's an absolutely incredible triumph. But then the next thing they do is really for the Luftwaffe a disaster. And I think we talked about this before. They have to win. Giving the RAF a bloody nose isn't enough.
No.
They can't be 90% successful to kind of phrase for another time in the war. They have to absolutely defeat the Royal Air Force, and they don't come close.
Well, and Hitler's grand design, his grand strategy, is to defeat the forces in the West, then go back to the drawing board, build up strength again, and then invade the Soviet Union to get that all-precious Lebensraum, living space that he's been talking about. This is the grand strategy. The problem is, by not defeating Britain, that puts a massive spanner in the works, because it leaves them in danger of having to fight on two fronts. And the problem is they're like kids in a sweet shop with the countries that they've captured. By the end of 1940, the cupboard's bare again. You know, they've taken all the spoils of war from Scandinavia and from France and so on, and there's nothing left.
Yeah.
So where do they get all their supplies and resources? Well, they get it from going into the Soviet Union, but they still haven't defeated Britain. And hovering in the wings on the other side of the Atlantic is the United States of America, with its huge population and its huge capacity for industry and supply and all the rest of it. So the Battle of Britain puts him in a quandary because they haven't subdued Britain. So what are you going to do? Well, what he is going to do is go into the Soviet Union way earlier than he ever planned to do. And with catastrophic results, as we know.
By instinct, he's a gambler. He regards himself as a man in a hurry anyway.
Yeah.
And the Battle of Britain forces his hand on what he's going to do next. Yeah. And I think, however...
It changes the war completely.
Yeah. Well, it shapes the war into a completely different direction. However, I'm here... I'm sat at Stuffy Dowding's desk, and the Battle of Britain has ended, and what happens to me now? I get fired. I mean, it's like a bad episode of The Apprentice.
It is, but then some context needs to be done. You know, it's always seen as perceived to be the plotting of Sholto Douglas, who takes over, and Lee Mallory, who takes over from Park. It is, but actually the person who really signs his retirement warrant is Max Beaverbrook, who is the Minister of Aircraft Production and who he gets on very, very well with. And the truth of the matter is, by November 1940, Dowding has twice deferred his retirement. Well, and he is exhausted, and it is definitely a time for a change.
Yeah, he says he's done in, but the
manner.
The manner of his departure, and the fact he isn't properly honoured, the fact he isn't elevated to Marshal, the fact that, you know, that he's actually treated as a sort of worn-out slipper and discarded, I think...
is a disgrace.
85 years distance is a total injustice.
Well, and so is the treatment of Park, who should have been elevated much higher than he gets to by the end of the war.
But Park at least carries on being regarded as useful, at least by the Royal Air Force, whereas Dowding is cast aside like so many visionaries, you know.
But the accolades do follow, and in the years that follow the Battle of Britain and the end of the war, you know, he is elevated to the position he is. He becomes Marshal of the Air Force. He's Lord Dowding.
It should have been a down payment.
I agree.
What he achieved here.
But let's end on a good note, because, you know, here we are at the end of this series. The Battle of Britain has been won. Yep. Britain has not been defeated. Yep. The writing is on the wall for the Germans. Hitler is about to make the biggest mistake of his life, of his career, by going into the Soviet Union earlier with catastrophic results. I think it's time now to echo the footsteps of Dowding and indeed Laurence Olivier and step out onto the balcony and gaze winsomely over the southern London.
All right, you do that, but I've got a report here from the 7th of November. There's a bit about use of wing formations, a big wing, and I just need to pick that scab one last time. Go on, let's go.
Look at that view.
Yes.
Where's the music?